Yeah, I'd say the dining scene back in the early to mid 80s was quite backward, I'm sorry to say, quite traditional foods, so there wasn't much exposure to the types of dining we experience today, the modern dining we have. So for me, going to TAFE in the mid 80s and overlooking the expo site being constructed, I guess I was in a group of young chefs learning the trade so that we could all be trained ready for the event.
There were jobs to be had because the world was coming to Brisbane, and then you're watching the whole thing come out of the ground. You were too at home, weren't you, Nick? Because your dad was helping to draw the plans up for it all.
Yeah, so Dad was on the original Bligh McCormack planning committee in 1984, and as a youngster, in that year I caught the plan sitting on Dad's desk for World Expo 88, and it had all the artists' impressions of the fun park, and I went to school and told kids that there's a roller coaster theme park coming to Brisbane.
Wow.
And, it was very exciting times back then.
Yeah. And so describe it. A lot of people have moved to Brisbane in the years since. Describe what it was like on the site when it was finally built.
Yeah, so, I used to go every day after school, and then I kept hovering around the Meccano section in the French pavilion, and the lady there just said to me one day, do you want just a job here helping kids build Meccano? And I've later become a mechanical engineer, so it was quite fitting. And it got me a staff pass, which was very valuable because you could get in before start time and beat the queues to any pavilion that you wanted. Also, I just remember all the other planning associated at the time. And so, Brisbane back then, the domestic airport that we have today was originally going to be a combination international and domestic, and they realised soon that it wasn't going to be big enough for purely football for both, so they repurposed it purely as a domestic airport back then, and then we had to wait until sort of 1990-ish for our new international airport at the time.
So we're going back to 1988, 1300 222 612. Do you remember Expo? Do you remember Brisbane before? Do you remember Brisbane after? How does a big event like this change a city? This will give us some clues about 2032. We're asking you to not only remember, but to analyse how it changed our city. We picked that up, Nick and Jason. Brisbane, don't worry about Brisbane. You can get to the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast from there. That's the pitch. Sorry, go on.
I actually thought you were going to put the Breaker ad on that was filmed on the Expo site at the time.
But that was the sales for Brisbane. Like, we got nothing to, like this. You can see them there with the whiteboard, can't you? There's nothing to recommend this joint except you can get to other places from there.
It's the gateway, yes.
That's a shocker. There's been such a change in our perception of Brisbane. Do you remember Expo, the Spaghetti House, the Ship Inn, the Munich Brauhaus, the South Pacific Lagoon, the monorail that they ripped down, the Nepal Peace Pagoda, which is still there, and people from around the world coming to Brisbane? It changed the city. Let's think about how it changed the city. What is the legacy of these big events? Peter's on the line from Bunukin. Peter, why do you think you didn't take advantage of Expo?
Well, I was silly. I only went once a week. And I sort of realised in hindsight that I should have been going almost every single day.
Why did you think that?
Well, just looking back, look at the Facebook page that these two wonderful gentlemen have got operational, and you just see so much entertainment going on. The River Stage was just firing away. Scott Hutchinson raves about, the current River Stage, but it's not a patch on what was operational during World Expo 88. Just absolutely phenomenal. And then you had the street parades in the morning, and at night time, the Qantas nighttime parade. And, the whole thing just gave an absolute spark to Brisbane. And I'm pretty well sure if we keep our mind focused that the Olympic Games are going to do exactly the same thing.
Okay, let me. You're on the Olympic Committee. You've been elected. Okay, the expectations for what happened in public places changed. That's what you're telling me, isn't it? That we used to socialise in a pub or in a, if you wanted to see theatre, you went inside. But suddenly things were happening outside, and everybody could come together and gather. That's what you're saying to me.
Oh, absolutely. And, I remember the Brisbane City Council was dead set against footpath dining, and Sally Ann had to really grab the bit between her teeth because, footpath dining, it's dangerous. Flies might get on your food. A vehicle may mount a curb and drive into you. And she had a battle royale. And then Jim Sawley had to have the same battle to get footpath dining approved and accepted. I mean, what would Brisbane be now without footpath dining? It'd just be such a boring place.
And that's fascinating, isn't it? 1300 222 612. Nick Feros is with me in the studio. Jason Ford, who is a chef. They both run the Facebook a site for Expo 88. That's really interesting what he's saying, Nick, because the whole thing was ripped down.
Yeah.
So it's had a legacy, but it was all just temporary. It all just vanished.
Yeah, and then there was a very much a vacuum in Brisbane for a period of time after that, and the public really cried out for that alfresco dining to be reinstated back into the suburbs. And I mean, I remember as a child growing up in West End in the late 70s and 80s, people would try and put tables out on footpaths. The council inspectors would come and take them away, and the whole thing had done a 180 by the end of by 1990. I mean, people like Stefan with JoJo's adding the balcony on in the mall, and Park Road, Milton, the Scoops at Paddington. I mean,
suddenly we're outside.
Yeah, we went outdoors to eat.
Yeah, and we've democratised culture as well.